Welcome everyone to this Photoshop tutorial. Today we will be making a website using Photoshop. This tutorial is for people with basic knowledge about Photoshop. I will not be going over the basics of Photoshop. And so let's begin. So the first step is to download the original image we are going to copy from the link below in the description of this tutorial, and import it into Photoshop. Once you have it in, you can convert this background file into a layer, and we can call this original image. Alright, and then you can proceed by doing a new layer. The first step is to pick all the colors from the scene, so we can have a quick access of each of them later on. So pick the rectangle tool and create a simple square. Then you can duplicate this square a few times. We can start by 6. You can put those squares on the top right corner of the screen, and then pick one of them on the layer and go to blending options. In the blending options, go to color overlay and into the setting, then pick the first color and do the same thing for each individual square by picking the colors of your scene. Don't forget to pick the background color and the black color for later. Once you are done, you can take all the layers. You can right-click on the layers by selecting them all and convert them to a smart object. Then rasterize the layer and rename it colors. And you can keep it there for now. Now the next step is to go and create a new layer and make the original image 50% transparency. You can then create a new layer and name it white background, and you can put it underneath the image and fill it with white color. So now we can work on the original image and still have our colors on the top right corner. So let's start with the general layout of the scene. You start with the rectangle tool and you copy the first rectangle, the first square. Don't forget to put it over the original image, and then just copy it to the right 2 times and take all of them and copy them to the bottom. You can now put them at 50% opacity just to see what's underneath, and one by one you can fill them with the same technique we used before with the appropriate colors. So for each of the square, find the original color and fill. After doing so, you can check if the colors are correct by setting the opacity of those layers to 100%. And once they are fine, you can then convert them all into a smart object and then rasterize layer, and you can rename this layout. The next step is to put the original image on top of all layers and set it to 50% transparency. It should be already done. Now we can proceed to the details. So we're gonna start with the tabs on top of the image, which is pretty easy. We are going to create a rectangle, and we can make it appear on top of the layout because the layer will be anyway under the layout layer, and you can put it underneath the layout. You can then copy this rectangle onto the next one, and the next one, and the next one, until you have all tabs as rectangles. Now, the same as for the color check and the layout, you want to put the original image on top, on bottom, and put it to a 50%, and the background. You can now proceed to selecting each tab individually, and by going to blending options and color overlay, selecting the appropriate color for each tab. After you've finished, you can select all tabs and convert them to a smart object and rasterize the layer. You can put the raw file on top of everything to see what's the next step. Now you can either recreate all the icons or find similar icons on the internet, but I will not create all the icons. I will just import mine, but feel free to create your own icons. You can now place all the icons where they should be. Now the next step is to create a file, a group called icons, and be sure to put your icons inside so you can quickly remove them and show them all together. The next step is to recreate this little shadow that each of the icons is making over the tab behind, and to do so we will need to get the original image on 100% because we need the colors. So for each icon you can start by going over the path tool and create a path going like this. Then you can select this path and make a selection by going into the path tab on the right click and make selection. You can now create a new layer and pick the color with the I shortcut, or by simply going into color and clicking the color itself. Then you can fill this selection with the color. You can check the result by hiding the original image. Now you may notice that we are going over the layout, but we can fix it later on, or maybe even now. You can simply select all the pixels that are going over the tab and delete, or you can put this shadow under the layout tab, be sure to call this shadow, for example, 01, so you can know which shadow it is. You can proceed by doing the same for each other icons. See you next time. Once you have finished, you can see the result by hiding the original image. It should look like this. Okay, the next step is to create this little arrow going from the yellow to the brown side. To do this, you can pick the color and create a shape of a square, then turn it 45 degrees and be sure to put it over the original image and put it right on top of the original shape. Then don't forget to put it over the layout and to merge the layout and the shape. The result should be like this. You can also leave the rectangle as a single layer and name it, for example, orange arrow, if you like, to move it around later. But I don't, so I can just merge it. You can also create a new group and call it shadows and put all the shadows in it, so you can have a better control over what you do. Renaming the layers and the groups is very important, so later on you are not lost in your files. The next step will be to create the little squares of colors that are over the layout. To do this, you can just copy the square using the rectangle tool and be sure that the square is over the original layout. Then you can proceed to convert to a smart object, rasterize the layer, and go into blending options, into color overlay, and pick the color. Also, this is not the same color, so I have to change my tab color to a more appropriate one. Like this. Alright. After that, you can convert this rectangle to a smart object and rasterize it and name it small square 01, and then you can copy it over the bottom left side and copy once more to the middle right side over here, and make sure to change the color of this last one to white. Okay, now it is the time to create the little pins. I don't know how it's called, to be honest, those little shapes that we got here. So you can set the original file image to 100%, so we can easily pick the colors later on. And we start with the ellipse tool. You can just create an ellipse. It doesn't matter what size you start with, because you can always resize later on. Then you can create another one, but smaller. And a last one being bigger. The next step is to put together those two shapes, the two first ellipses, convert them to a smart object, rasterize them, and pick the color using the color overlay technique. You can now create 4 points, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and be sure to position them properly, like this, and like this. Then you can select them and rasterize the layer where you made it. You can put this layer under the ellipses. To make it clear, I'm gonna convert my ellipses to an object and then rasterize it and rename it ellipses. And the shape, I'm gonna rename it cone. So you have the cone and you have the ellipses. Now you can pick using eye this color and fill the bottom part of the ellipse. It should look like this. The next step is to take the last ellipse and using color overlay, change its color to the other shade of brown. You can now rasterize, convert to smart object and rasterize the layer and rename it big ellipse and put it underneath the cone. Now you can move it so it makes the right shape, like this. The last stage is going to be the needle. You can just take the path tool, create a new layer, and just create a quick 3-point shape, like this. You can set the fill over here to be white. Also, you need to put it under the big ellipse. And now you can adjust those points so it makes the right length. I want it to be like this. And you can rename it needle. You can also use the deform tool, Ctrl T. You can take the ellipses and the cone and press Ctrl plus T to make it a bit wider. Alright, now we have 4 layers, being the ellipses, being the cone, the big ellipse, and the needle. We don't want to collapse those 4 layers because we're gonna use it later. We want to create a group and name this group brown pin and move it to the side. Now you want to duplicate this whole layer, this whole file, this group, and name it blue pin. You can now go into the ellipses and by going to the blending options, get color overlay and pick the second color from the blue pin and convert it to a smart object and rasterize it later on. And now you take the cone, you go into blending options, color overlay, and you pick the second shade of blue and you rasterize the layer as always. You can then pick the fill icon and take the second shade and fill the second ellipse. for the last ellipse, you want to go into blending option, color overlay, and pick the second shade. And lastly, for the needle, you want the gray. And you have your second needle, your second pin. You can now simply take your pin and using Ctrl T over the group, position it as it is in the original image. It's the same for the brown pin. You can just rotate it and position. The next step will be to create this little shape right here. To do this, you want to go to Google and find an image of this shape and then import it to Photoshop. And now you can use the Path tool and recreate this shape by doing this. 2, 3, 4, 5. We need to remove the fill to see through. 5, 6, and 7. Now you can take those points and using the convert point tool, you can now use the curves to adjust the shape and recreate the original shape. Once you are done, you can now select all the points and go to the stroke options and select the color. Or just for now, you can just use the black color. Then you want to set up the stroke. Once you have the proper width of the line, you can go into the stroke options by clicking here and make sure that your alignment system is to the center, not inside, and also that you have rounded caps. Once you have done this, you can convert this to a smart object and rasterize the layer. You can now remove the original image and position your shape over your image like this. It doesn't need to be the same. Now we want to change a few things. First, we need to set up the color, so we can go to blending options, color overlay, and select the blue we want. You can then convert to a smart object and rasterize the layer. And secondly, you want to select we can remove the original file for you to see more clearly. You want to, for example, use the lasso tool and select just this part of the shape, like this. All right. And you want to use the second shade of blue from here. You can create a new layer and fill this layer with this color, and then go and create a clipping mask over the previous layer. You can now merge those two and rename it shape. And you want to put it under the layout layer. Now you want to select everything like this, the middle section of the shape, and you want to create you want to go to the selection mode, right click and layer via copy. And you want to put the shape under everything, and the tab, you can name it shape visible. You want it to be over the layout we made at the beginning. So here we go. You can now show the original image, and we're gonna create those smart icons. So the first step will be to create the annual report icon. To do this, you want to create a rectangle over a new layer. Then you want to go to the rounded rectangle tool and create one like this. You can now copy this layer, and by pressing Ctrl T, turn it, put it over here, like this. You want now to merge both lines using Convert to Smart Object and Rasterize. You now want to go to Select and select this part and remove it. If you have some troubles with lines, you can always just pick a color and colorize it like this. So you want to now put this new shape where it should be, somewhere over here. Then you want to create a new rectangle and another one. And one more. And the last one. Be sure all of them have the same width. Now you want to make them aligned. And you want to turn them using Ctrl T and position them where they should be. Over here. You can now rasterize those layers, and by using blending options and color overlay, get every single color you need, just like we did at the beginning with the color checkbox and with the layout. After you're finished, you can convert everything to a smart object and rasterize it, and you can rename it annual report middle icon. And also the rectangle, we can rename it annual report background. The next step is to put the text on it. So you want to press T or go to the text icon and simply type in annual reports. And make sure to use the time New Roman. That is actually used inside this document. And by using the setup, you can change all the settings so it fits. Then place the text, and using Ctrl T, you can place it where it should be. The last step will be to recreate the little details on the right side of the icon. For this, you can simply create a rectangle. Make sure it doesn't go outside the shape. Okay, the next step is going to be to get the color of it and rasterize it first, then blending options, color overlay and pick the first color. Then you can duplicate this one and select another color. And the same for the last one. You can now rasterize those layers. And now we need to add the drop shadow. So start with we can rename them blue detail, orange detail, and gray detail. Start with the blue one and go into blending options and drop shadow. You want to set this drop shadow onto 90 degrees, like this, and change the size of it to like 2 and 2, or maybe 3 and 3. Yeah, it looks fine. So 3 and 3 and 25% opacity. You can now press Alt over the effect and duplicate the effect over the orange detail and the gray detail. And the last part, you want now to convert those into a smart object. And the reason is because the drop shadow options settings are universal. It means if you set up a drop shadow for a scene, everything on the scene will have the same setup. But if you convert to a smart object, then you can like save those drop shadow options and they will rest because now they're pixels. So after that, you can put those three layers underneath the background. Then you can convert the background into rasterized layer. And you want to actually see through. So you can put a 50% opacity over the background. And you can now select the pixels. Then you want to remove this selection from the background, like this. You can now set the background to 100%. Also, you need to remove this shadow from here because it is not needed. You can now click over the background and set up your own drop shadow. And this one will be like 120 degrees and the same size. So you have this effect right here. You can now convert this to a smart object and rasterize it and remove all the shadows you don't need from here and here. Now you can create a new group and you rename this annual report icon. You can put all those tabs inside it, and by pressing Ctrl T, put this at the same position. Be sure this group is under the pins, like here. You can check your results by hiding your original image, like this. Okay, so at this point we are going to create the newspaper icon we can see over here. To do so, we first need to take the original image on top and put it to 100% opacity. Then we are going to create a new layer and call it newspaper background. or sheet. And then we go over the rectangle tool and we make sure to take the color of the newspaper and create a rectangle. We don't need to respect the ratio of the newspaper because we are not trying to make a pixel perfect copy of this website. Now we need to create a new layer and name it gray rectangle left, and we go over the rectangle tool and we pick the gray from here and create a rectangle. Once again, it do not need to be perfect. Then we press Alt and Shift over this rectangle and we copy it to the right and we name it gray rectangle right. Then we go over the text tool and we press T and we click and we write on news. The proper font is Time New Roman. It is the font that has been used in this original shape. So we go over and we increase the font size. We make sure there is no bold or italic. We go over, we press V and we position it properly. If it's too big, we can always reduce. Also, we need to change the color of it to black. Here we go. Now we can go over and create a new layer on top and call it top black lines. And we go over to the line tool and we make sure to remove the stroke and go to fill and make it black, just pure black. We can point over here and create a line. If it's too white, it's not a problem. We can always zoom in and press Ctrl T to transform the shape and just make it way thinner. Now we can just go over and we also need to adjust the sides from here, and here is fine. So we go over, we press V for move, and we with Alt and Shift pressed, we copy it to the bottom. Alright, now we can create a new layer again and call it middle white rectangle, and we go over to the rectangle tool, we make it white and we create a rectangle. If you want, you can always press Ctrl R and just drag a helper to help you position all the elements, but you can do it without it if you like. So just create a rectangle over here, somewhere like this, and you can adjust it pixel perfect here. Now we can just go over and create a new layer again, call it middle text lines. We need first to pick the color from here, this gray, and then go over to the line tool and create a line. Then we want to zoom in and reduce its its thickness by a little bit. So let's go over with this size. I think it's proper. It is. Now we can just zoom in and holding Alt Shift copy it to the bottom. And let's make the space like 4 pixels. Actually 3 pixels will be better, like this. Now we go over and select both layers together holding Ctrl or Shift. Then you can zoom, and with Alt and Shift pressed we can copy it to the bottom again. Now we can take all 4 of them and copy them again, and then take all 8 of them in order to just save some time, and copy them to the bottom again and again and again. Okay, now we can go over and take all of those layers that you could just created, all the middle text lines, and merge the shapes, and then convert it to a rasterized layer. Now we need to go over the line tool and create a new layer, and we don't need to rename it because we will be deleting it afterwards. And we just create one line with just a little bit more thickness, like let's say 7, maybe 6, and we just create a straight line from the top to the bottom. Then we position it somewhere in the 1/3 of the length, and then again, let's just move this one a little bit more. All right, then you take both the shapes and you can merge them and then rasterize them. Then you can right click on the layer and go into the select pixels, then move to the middle text layer and press delete. Then you can simply remove or delete your shape you just created, and you can see you just remove the pixels from the shape. This is what we want. Now we can just rename it properly and go over and create a selection rectangle and remove some of the lines. We can remove somewhere around this much. It should be fine. We can delete it. Now we need to create a new layer and name it bottom rectangle white, and we go over the rectangle tool and we make it white. Then you just create it somewhere here all the way to the bottom. All right, now you can adjust it to be just right on the spot. Now create a new layer and name it let's name it screen, no, let's name it graph icon screen border. All right, and we go over and we just create a rounded rectangle with, let's say 5. It's not enough, let's say 7. 7 is fine. So just create one with 7 of radius. I think I just created one wrongly. Alright, it can be white or black, it doesn't really matter, because now we are going to go over and right click and blending options. Now we want the background to be the same color, so we just go into color overlay and select the right color from here on the left. Now we want, sorry, to go over inside and go into stroke and select a stroke that is inside, and let's make it 5. Yeah, 6 is 5 is 9 is nice. It can be also outside, it doesn't really matter, but I prefer the inside stroke for screens. Now also we missed the right layer, so we make sure to rename this one graph icon screen border. Now one important thing is to convert this to a rasterized layer, and I will show you why. If I keep it like this and I try to Ctrl T to resize it, the borders will stay the same no matter what size the screen is, and we don't want this type of adaptive scaling. We want to rasterize this, and so it stays the same all the time. Actually it doesn't. You also need to go into the convert to smart object and then rasterize the layer, and now it should be fine, and it is, you see. All right, let's go over and create a new border, a new rounded rectangle. On the bottom, let's create it like this at first, then go over, right click, blending option and color overlay into black, and we just position it underneath somehow in the middle. All right, now we can go and rename it graph icon bottom line. Now we create a new layer and we go over to the line tool, no stroke, and the fill wants to be black. Now this is way too thick, just go over and change it to 3 and create a top bottom line. Alright, now let's copy this, let's duplicate this layer by pressing Alt and moving it on top so we have a duplicate. We press Ctrl T and we rotate it 90 degrees and position it somewhere here. We can then go over to the edge and stretch it to the right. We can now merge those two shapes together and rename them graph icon, graph lines. Now we take over the pen tool, or press just P onto a new layer, and we can just trace a triangle using the pen tool. Don't worry about precision. You can always go over the selection tool and just simply move the points one by one to achieve the right effect. Let's move it to the edge of the shape. All right. Now we go over the convert point tool, and by pressing Alt, we just take one side and we move it and form a curve. All right. Now, just a quick point. I'm not trying to recreate this graph point by point. We will not waste time on this, and we'll just try and create a random graph just to make it look like a graph, okay? But if you want, you can try and recreate the same shape they did in this icon. So now we just select all those points together, and we rasterize the layer. We go over the blending options, and we go into color overlay, and we select the proper gray. We can try this gray. This one is too bright. Okay, this one. So we just make it gray and put it behind, on the bottom, behind the lines, so it doesn't overlap. Alright, now it's time to make a little group. Let's create a group and call it newspaper icon and graph icon. And we just put inside everything that is part of the graph icon. I think I didn't miss anything. Yeah, I got it all. So now we can just press Ctrl T and resize it. That's why I told you it doesn't matter if you create it in the right size. Now we can create another group and call it newspaper icon. And we put the previous group as well as the rest of the layers that are part of the newspaper sheet into the newspaper icon folder, and we try it. It works. Alright, so we have our group. We are also missing the white rectangle. I didn't put it in, so let me go over and do it. Actually, like this. Alright, now it's perfect. Now, before you resize this one and put it in the right place, I want you to do some quick duplicate. So let's make it small, and let's press Alt and copy it over there. Let's rename this newspaper 02 and the other one 01. Okay, let's move this one a bit to the right so we can see what we are doing. Let's go and open this group and remove the newspaper icon graph. And now let's go to the bottom and find out our annual report icon we did before. Let's open it and let's take just the middle icon from it. You will see what I'm doing. Also, we need to hide the original image for some time, just so we see what's underneath. So we take the middle icon from the annual reports group, and by pressing Alt, you can drag and drop it like this. Now we need to move this out of this group, obviously, so we just move it to our newspaper icon 02. Alright, we can just now minimize the annual reports and also show the original image. It doesn't matter anymore. Now take this annual report middle icon, let's rename it newspaper board icon, and we zoom in. We need to do just two things. First is Ctrl and T and make it straight. And second is blending options and go over the color overlay and make it gray. This gray is fine. Now we can go and move those where they should be. So the first, I'm gonna hide this one, and the first go over here, Control T, rotation and scale, and we put it right in the place. And the second one is newspaper number 2. We go here, Control T, and we scale it down like this. Now, one point to notice is that we have created this shape before. Let me hide the original image so you can see. So we have created this shape before, and we want it to be on top. So let's find this little part we made before. It's this one for me. I hope you rename it properly. We can move this layer on top of everything, and we have it. Also, I just noticed I have some pixels from here. I can just press E for eraser and remove those ones. Alright, perfect. Now, also there is a background behind this newspaper icon. So let's just go over and rectangle tool, and let's create this rectangle and put it underneath the newspaper icon number 2. Let's name it newspaper icon 02 background. Alright, we need a few more things. First, there is this icon in the middle. This one is pretty fast. Let me show you how it's done. Let's create a new layer and go over the rounded rectangle tool. You can straight on pick the color from it for the background. Create this, actually I want it bigger, so let's create this one like this. Let's increase the radius to 10 and create a big rectangle. Now we need to actually put the original image at 50% transparency so we can see what we are doing. And right click on this, blending options, stroke, and the stroke needs to be inside, and like no, 11 looks nice. Now we can convert this to a smart object to keep the borders to the same size and rasterize the layer. Let's rename this screen, or just PC underscore screen. And now you want to create another rectangle. Let's make a new layer, and let's pick black color and create a line. And you put this line under the PC. Pretty straightforward so far. Now you have two choices. You can either create this icon yourself, it's a man, or just get one from the internet. I'm gonna go the easy way and just drag and drop an icon from the internet like this. If you are working on a serious project, be sure to use copyright-free icons from the internet. Now you can rasterize this layer. You just import and press W. I mean the magic wand tool. Click on the white and press delete. So you just have the guy. Now let's Control T and position him on top of the screen, right where he needs to be, somewhere like here. I guess it's fine. Now by pressing Alt, Shift and V, you can duplicate this one to the right side. Now go over to the line tool and create an arrow. We can do it by creating a line first, like this. Then you can go and duplicate this layer by holding Alt, then Control T, right click and go into flip vertical. Then you move it with Shift to the bottom. Then you go and create a new line somewhere in the middle. You can always move it bottom if you need to, like this. Now you can take all three shapes and merge them and rasterize them and call it arrow. And put it, you can also make it shorter. It's a bit too long. Now let's put it somewhere over here. Alright. Also, let's now just rename all the layers that we need. Man left, man right, bottom black line, and now create a group, name it PC icon, and put all the layers inside. You can minimize the group and put it where it should be. Control T and we make it smaller. Now you only have the text left to do, to be honest. I just noticed my background here is black. This is not good, so let's go into newspaper 02 background, right click blending options, color overlay, and go into white. Good. I'm also noticing I want some drop shadow on this icon, so let's go into newspaper icon 02, blending options and drop shadow into the other side. Let's go with a 10. Let's 10 and 10. It's a bit too much. Let's 6 and 6 and 40%, like 30%. All right. Now we need to put on the text. So let's get the original image on top and make it 50% transparent. This is good. Now let's go and just press T and click. Just firstly type option 3 and basically just text typing. Just go over and change the color to be white. The font, I don't know what font has been used. Let's just go over with Arial and make it bold and italic, make it bigger and make more space. It's probably not the right font, but I don't care for this particular project. It's close enough, to be honest, so just put it here and you can press V for movement, then Alt and duplicate it to put it here. Go over and change it to option 4. Oh, it's actually 2, so option 2. And one last duplicate to the bottom. And this time it's option 4. And we also want to change the color to the gray. Like this. Now there is something left. This text here, it's called the Lorem Ipsum developer text. This is what people put into designs that imply text when they have no text to put in from a potential client. So you can just Google on Lorem Ipsum and copy and paste the text. So this is exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm going to find this text and copy it, then just go over the text tool and create a text rectangle and paste the text. Now make it white, of course, and change the font. Let's keep Arial, but let's not make it bold and not italic. Let's make the alignment to the left side and make it smaller by a lot, like 11. And the spacing is also not right, so let's change it. Alright, it looks good enough. Now we can go over here and go with the text tool and create another rectangle and paste the text again, and you just have it. Now we still have some work to do. First, about this little bar of colors. This one is pretty easy. We're gonna use the checker we have from the beginning to just put it here. So go over and to the bottom of your layers and get your old color layer that we have used in the beginning. It's right here. Actually, you want to duplicate it because you want it on top of almost everything. So let's put it right before the text, like here. Let's name it color bar and let's move it here. You can press Ctrl and T and rotate it and then position it where it should be. And then you want to make it smaller. You can check your results by hiding the original image. pretty good. Actually, I can just make it better by changing its size. Alright, so we have this color bar here that represents the colors that we used in the project. Now we need to change the background. So to do this, you need to put the original image on top and put it to 100% opacity. So this is the original image. You want to go now over to the bottom and find out your previous white background layer. You right click, you go into blending options, and you go over to color overlay, and you pick the color. Pretty easy. You can hide the image, the original image, to see the result. And here we go. This is actually done. Let's also hide the color bar that we used in the beginning, the colors, and remove the markers. And here we go. This is your project. This is the graphic website we just created with Photoshop. Thank you for following this tutorial, and see you next time.